You know, when you think of Santa Claus, he seems timeless, right? Like he's been a part of Christmas forever. But what if I told you the jolly man in the red suit has a secret? His modern story isn't some ancient folklore, but a surprisingly recent and very human invention. I mean, we all know this guy. The big belly, the red suit, the sleigh packed with toys. He is the face of Christmas, a figure who feels as old as the holiday itself. But that's where our story takes a very, very sharp turn. Because what if the whole American version of Santa Claus wasn't born from some ancient tradition brought over by settlers, but was actually launched into our culture as part of an elaborate and honestly a brilliant literary hoax? Yep, that's right. This is the story of the Great Santa Hoax. It's a story that reveals the American Santa we know and love is way more recent than we think, with an origin rooted more in satire than in actual sainthood. Okay, so the core of this whole mystery really comes down to this key piece of evidence from a scholar named Charles Jones. He went back and scoured all the records of the early Dutch settlers in New York, the very people who were supposed to have brought the tradition with them. And what did he find? Absolutely nothing. Not a single mention of a gift-giving St. Nicholas. The whole foundational myth was, well, a myth. So if the Dutch didn't bring him, then who did? Well, the culprit, or maybe we should say the creative genius, was the famous American author Washington Irving. You know, the same guy who gave us the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
See, Irving wasn't just an author. He was a master of what we'd now call viral marketing. To build hype for his new satirical book back in 1809, he cooked up this amazing citywide hoax. He planted fake missing person ads for a fictional historian, and he got the whole city of New York buzzing. Then, right at the peak of all this frenzy, he miraculously published the historian's missing manuscript.
And buried deep inside that satirical book, that's where he pulled off the masterstroke. Just for comedic effect, Irving completely invented this Dutch tradition of St. Nicholas visiting New York. He described a flying wagon, a pipe, and, get this, that iconic gesture of laying a finger beside his nose. All of these core parts of the Santa myth were literally born from Washington Irving's joke. So, okay, if Irving invented the American version, where did he get the raw materials for his character? For that, we need to trace the real historical thread, from this jolly elf all the way back to a solemn saint. The story really begins with a real person, Saint Nicholas. He was a 4th century Greek bishop living in what we now call Turkey, and he was famous for his secret gift-giving and just incredible generosity. His most famous story is about how he provided dowries for 3 poor sisters to save them from a really hard life. His legacy was all about pure charity. And this image, wow, it just captures the whole transformation perfectly. On the left, you've got the historical St. Nicholas, a pretty serious religious figure from the 4th century. And on the right, the character we know, largely invented in the 19th century. Jolly, secular, even commercial. The shift from a thin, ascetic saint to a portly, friendly elf really shows you just how dramatically the story was reshaped. So over the next 1,000 years or so, the legend of St. Nicholas spreads all across Europe. And in the Netherlands, he transforms into Sinterklaas, a stately figure who arrived not from the North Pole, but on a steamboat all the way from Spain. This was the European figure whose name and gift-giving theme Irving borrowed for his satire. Now, Irving's joke didn't just exist in a vacuum. It became a foundation for other people to build on. A few years later, in 1823, the famous poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, you know, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, it took Irving's character and gave him 8 tiny reindeer. Then, fast forward over a century to 1931, and a hugely popular ad campaign for Coca-Cola cemented our modern image of a large, warm, human-sized Santa in that iconic red suit. But here's the thing, the idea of some magical being bringing gifts in the dead of winter isn't just an American or European thing. When you look across the globe, you find this whole family of fascinating winter gift bringer. Let's just take a quick trip around the world. In Russia, you've got Dede Moroz, or Grandfather Frost, who gives gifts to atone for his past as an evil sorcerer. Cool, right? Italy has La Befana, a good witch on a broomstick, while France's Père Noël travels by donkey. Every culture has its own unique spin on this really powerful archetype. So what's the thread connecting an invented prank, a saint's legend, and a reformed sorcerer? Well, it shows us the traditions aren't just these ancient relics we inherit. They're stories we're actively shaping to fit our own needs.
They all tap into this deep, shared human desire for a little bit of magic, generosity, and hope, especially during the darkest, coldest time of the year.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. The American Santa Claus literally began as a joke inside a satirical book that just happened to capture the public's imagination and grew into this beloved tradition. So, if something we cherish so much can be consciously invented, what does that say about the incredible power of the stories we choose to create, to believe in, and to pass on?